With that being said, let's move on over to Arkansas. Okay. The next team that we're going to talk about in this SEC preview. And this is a big year for Sammy P over there at Arkansas. I mean, there were already talks of him like, oh, should he have been fired? Should he not have? Yep. The athletic department's like, hey, nope, we're riding with them. The boosters are like, nope, we're riding with them. Uh, Hoping, praying that this guy can do something to fix the offensive line, which is, of course, his specialty. Uh, he hires Bobby Petrino in the offseason to be his offensive coordinator. I like the hire, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think Bobby Petrino is a good offensive coordinator, and people are going to point at, oh, look at Texas A&M's offense last year. Dude, with four quarterbacks, dude, he was leading. By the way, when he started letting Bobby Petrino call plays was not till like late in the season. He was leading LSU at halftime with his third string
Yeah.
quarterback in his bag. Now, I know LSU's defense was pretty bad. Okay. Everyone knows that. But the point is that Bobby Petrino still has it in his bag to draw up plays, to scheme people open. And that wasn't really Bobby Petrino's offense. There were Bobby Petrino's flavors, but that was Jimbo's offense. Okay. I really do think Bobby Petrino, with full control in the offense and Sam Pittman helping, design the run game, I really think that in terms of giving his team the best opportunity to make plays, I think that's going to be there. Now, execution and talent is a different question. All right. But speaking of talent, I do want to talk about um Taylor Green over there at the quarterback position. Okay. I am a huge Taylor Green fan. I think he's so talented. I think he's got all of the tools. He's fast. He's big. He's got a pretty good arm.
He's got a cannon for an arm, right? But it's consistency.
Accuracies and consistency is tough, right, to come by with him. Uh, but people have liked what he's done in the spring. I don't think like he is the starter, right? I don't think anyone's pushing him. He's going to be the starting quarterback for this Arkansas team, which is pretty impressive, going from G5 to P5. Um, but yeah, a lot is going to depend on Taylor Green and whether or not he can hold on to the football, get rid of the ball, like hold on to the football. I mean, don't turn the ball over. Can you get rid of the ball quickly, right? If your offensive line isn't as good as maybe hope people are hoping that it is, or at least hoping that it's improved. You need Taylor Green. If you're an Arkansas fan, Taylor Green is going to have to do so much for you. And he's a similar build to KJ Jefferson. He's a little bit, I guess, not as thick, if that's the way the word you want to use. But you really like KJ Jefferson did so much for that offense, right? And you're going to be asking Taylor Green to do a similar thing. Am I wrong?
No, I don't think so. I do worry. Yeah, like you said, the durability there and the consistency too. KJ Jefferson was a really good quarterback. He also battled injuries as well
Mm-hmm.
and still played
Played through.
fantastically. He also now that O line was not good and it didn't look good, but he made a really bad O line look pretty bad. And to me, that's really, really impressive. Yeah, obviously Taylor Green
It was
comes in.
bad. It was really
Yeah,
bad.
it was bad, but I think he's still like he avoided a lot of sacks. But I do wonder if you get a guy like Bobby Petrino and he could scheme around that, and I think that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. Uh, yeah, Green's deep ball is nice. It's just about consistency. I think they saw that even spring practice. He had a nice spring, but it was still highs and lows. And by the way, speaking of O-line, what happens when there is pressure? Especially SEC pressure. It's not Mountain West pressure, it's SEC pressure. And these guys are sometimes just as fast as he is, and he's got to deal with that. I do think it's pretty telling that Bobby Petrino, I do love the marriage of Petrino and Taylor Green.
Agreed.
And I think there can be some fun things. And by the way, they're also, and I guess we'll get to the wide receiver room eventually, but they're bringing back a ton of talent from last year, or at least production from a year ago. I mean, they don't lose a single one of their top like seven receiving threats, quote unquote, right? And it's I guess eight, yeah, five tight end or five, yeah, yeah, seven. I'm sorry, it's seven. But regardless, so it's pretty nice. But I also love the Quinn and Jackson too to marriage that with Taylor Green. Now the thing is his health, right? If both those guys stay healthy, I feel really good about what the offense looks like, right?
Yeah, I will say in terms of the Taylor Green getting pressure, I just looked this up. I didn't have this prepared before, but pressure to sack ratio, right? KJ Jefferson, and now this is crazy because he avoided even more sacks than it is telling, right? But 32% of the time he was pressured, he was sacked, which is a high number, and that is a quarterback stat, right?
Yeah.
To some degree, right? To some degree. Like there are some pressures that are just like unavoidable, right? Like they are going to turn to sacks, and I think a lot of that had to do with that. But you're sacked 42 times and 129 dropbacks, uh, or sorry, 129 times when you were pressured. That's a pretty high percentage, if you ask me. Taylor Green, on the other hand, he wasn't pressured obviously nearly as much. He's only pressured 68 times, but also he only dropped back 236 times. Only 8.8% of the time he was sacked on those pressures, which is one of the lower marks in the entire country, right? That's lower than Carson Beck. That's right around the Connor Wigman ballpark, which where like somebody that's like Bo Nix territory, right? Like that's a really good number to have. That's a really good number to have. So if Taylor Green can just be like that and be that athlete, now it's different, right? Because if you have oh, I don't know, a Nick Gordon, right? Or a James Pierce coming at you, right? They're more likely to bring you down than some guy from Air Force.
Prince
Now, Air Force has
CU,
some
yeah.
guys, but no, I'm just saying that there's a different level of athlete that you're dealing with in the SEC for sure. So, like that number, I would anticipate going up, but I think it's good news when you see a quarterback like this getting rid of the ball. It sounds like he's getting rid of the ball, finding a way to escape pressure. So, at least there's something to look forward to in that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. But looking at his weapons that he's going to throw the ball to, right? Like I said, they're bringing a lot of those guys back. Andrew Armstrong was a guy that I was really impressed with a year ago, right? The
Mm-hmm.
inconsistencies that was that Arkansas offense, he was one of the very, very bright spots, right? Obviously, he's 6'4", 200 pounds, coming from JUCO. He translated really, really well to the SEC early, and they relied upon him a lot. He was their leading receiver, and he comes back and is probably going to lead them again in yards as well. And even Isaac Tasala, right? Tyron Broden, Isaiah Satagna. Those are all guys that had production a year ago, had a lot of snaps. And you only feel better about what they can do, just another year older, another year comfortable in the system. And also, like I said, with Green and potentially the O-line is like the scheme is an upgrade, right? So you just feel better about everyone else in that offense playing a little bit better, at least being put in better position to succeed.
Yeah. So, what do you think about these two transfer receivers, Brown and Anthony? I mean, in terms of Anthony, I can speak on him because he's at A&M for a year.
Yeah, go
You're
for it.
looking at kind of a gadget guy, I would say Malik Hornsby-esque, you know, maybe not as good an athlete, but definitely the speed on that guy is pretty remarkable. I could see him having an impact on the game for sure. Um, yeah, what do you think about Brown? I mean, this guy, 18 yards per on an average depth of target. I mean, of course,
Yep.
that's offensive scheme dependent to some degree, but he was pretty productive.
Yeah, he's a guy. I mean, he was a four-star coming out of the state of North Carolina, went to UNC, then transferred, made his way over to USF. He's a guy um, that his speed is obviously, like you said, it's pretty evident on film as well as in the production on the stat sheet. He's played in a lot of games, right? He's been there. This is going to what is sixth year, right? Of college football. He started back in 2019. Um, I don't even know how he has eligibility, to be honest. Regardless, though, he does. And yeah, he's gonna be a 6-year senior here. I do think it's Green. He throws a good deep ball, right? Or at least I like his deep ball. This could be a nice, addition to a guy like Andrew Armstrong as well. Maybe not necessarily like every down reliability, but that's where you've got guys in that tight end room that I feel better about over the middle, consistently early downs, whatever it may be, and then short to intermediate routes. But Coffee Brown's also probably a guy that they were missing last year in terms of pushing the ball down the field.
Yeah, I agree. Which they weren't able to do a lot of, right? I mean, passing the ball, they threw the ball about 27 times per game for 180 yards. Both of those were bottom 30 in the country. And uh yeah, passing yards per completion, only 10 yards per completion, which was 118th in the country, bottom 20 in the country. And of course, they were 134th and first in the country in sacks allowed with over 4 sacks allowed per game, which is brutal. That is third worst in the entire country last year. Just, I mean, really brutal. I mean, the run game also was pretty atrocious last year for having a really good running back. But have we talked about the running back room?
Not really. No, I mentioned Jaquin and Jackson, but I love
I
Jaquin and
mean,
Jackson. I took him in our
yeah,
fan. I think he's a guy, if healthy, right? Which I know it's been his problem, but also I've heard things where he knows that. I think he understands how important this year is to him and his future in playing football, right? But he wants to be healthy. He's put on some weight, good weight. He is running the ball physical in practice. He looks like a guy with a big chip on his shoulder. And I think he's only benefiting from moving over to this by Petrino scheme, but also pairing up with a guy like Taylor Green, too, who's got athleticism as well.
yeah. Rodney Hill also is a really interesting transfer from Florida State, I believe. Was he not committed to Florida A&M earlier this cycle, and then he flipped over to Arkansas? But I know that Florida State fans really like Rodney Hill over there. I mean, he touched the ball 50 times last year in that offense where they already had two pretty stinking good running backs. So I would expect Rodney Hill to get some looks in this offense. I really would. I really would. He's a pretty young guy. Although Braylon Russell, the a true freshman 4-star. I mean, that's the guy that's certainly turning heads there. I I really like the running back room, but it's all going to come down to the offensive line because last year they only averaged 3.6 yards per carry, which was good for yet again. You guessed it, bottom 20, bottom 25 in the country. I mean, just and with Rocket Sanders, of course. I mean, now you understand why Rocket Sanders got out of there, right? Because just a brutal, and then AJ Green also got out of there as well. He went to Oklahoma State. Unfortunately, he got hurt. So I guess good luck to AJ Green over there. Hopefully, he can get healthy so he can play for them behind Ollie Gordon. But yeah, it's going to be really dependent on that offensive line, and I'm seeing a lot of transfers, which I don't know if that's exactly the formula for success. I think recruiting is most important in terms of building that offensive line, which is why, offensive line a lot of times is very predictable year to year. Although some years you're wrong, some years you're right. But I'm seeing a couple transfers that are gonna have to step up and be good. All right. Right? I mean, look at the three of them. They need to be good. They have to be. And you say
Yeah,
healthy.
you're looking at Fernando Carmona from San Jose State, Addison Nichols from Tennessee, Keyshawn Blackstock from Michigan State. I, yeah, like relying on multiple, but more than half of your line to be transfers is not an ideal recipe in the SEC when you are looking to run the ball, right? I don't know. Is it going to be better than last year? Probably because it was awful last year. But I mean, I guess I trust Sam Pittman to fix it, but I don't know how much you can really fix if it's just the talent and the depth isn't quite there. I don't hate Josh Braun coming back. I think
I
another
like
year
him.
older, getting a little bit better. He graded out well last year, especially in pass protection, trying to keep Jalen Green upright. And Dracutis did not. I don't know if they're going to slide him in the guard. I don't know if they're keeping him on a tackle.
I think they
Regardless,
have to,
so
right? They have to.
what whatever he does, whatever they do, he has to be better at it than he was a year ago. And I guess it does help, although you had KJ Jefferson last year, it does help adding an extra, +1 in that box. I guess if you have a threat of the running quarterback, it's one less person to necessarily block every play. But that happened last year too, and it just didn't work out. To me, it's going to be about how much how much can Bobby Petrino improve this O line? And I know it's not his job necessarily to, at least working with them every single day. That's Eric Mateos and Sam Pittman. But Bobby Petrino, with his scheme, I think you can make a little bit more O line friendly scheme and help out, maybe a struggling offensive line. It's also about keeping them ahead of the chains too. Like,
Yeah.
don't get caught in third and long. And especially with a guy like Taylor Green, who's not comfortable probably in the SEC, dropping back to pass on third and long, right? Keeping him in play action pass, keeping him in front of the chains, RPOs, blah, 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 all that good stuff that you like him doing, moving the football, or moving himself as well.
Yeah. I will say we haven't talked about him yet. Luke Haas.
Yes, dude. I was gonna say we cannot do an Arkansas
I
offensive video
cannot.
talking about him and even the tight end room as a whole. Also, real quick about last note on the O line, I do think that they did not get a ton of help blocking from this tight end group, right? Lucas was a freshman. Ty Washington was young. Marquise Gums struggled, right? Those guys have all, I think they've gotten better run blocking as well. That's going to help the O line maybe as well. But their beauty is in the reception game. I mean, you go ahead. You go ahead.
But Luke Haas, I mean, what else is there to say? I mean, he only played in 5 games last year. Well, really four, and then like what, one possession of the fifth game. He was awesome. He was phenomenal. He was a guy that you had to circle when teams were watching film. Look at Luke Haas. You're like, oh, this guy's like kind of special. Not that he's Brock Bowers-esque kind of athlete, but he was a really exceptional athlete. And it was really impressive that he uh won the playing time that he did as a freshman. And he went out there and he made the most of it. I mean, he's got the size, he's got good speed, he's got great hands. Um, he's a competitor for sure. I think Lucas is. Are you willing to say that he's probably your number one tight end going into the? I mean, no, Oscar Delp and Ben Urasek are really good at Georgia.
Are you talking about tight end room as a whole or just individual tight ends?
Just tight end in the SEC. Like, can you
Like
name like
pre-scoring, probably pre-scoring at Ole Miss.
pre-scoring? Okay, yeah. So there's what, like three or four maybe tight ends in the SEC that are maybe better than Lucas. Uh, yeah,
Maybe
Lucas.
Amari Niblack, but I consider him a slot wide receiver anyways.
Yeah,
But yeah,
he's like, and yeah,
regardless of that speaks to the impressive. I mean, he played in what 5 games, right? And really four in a drive, right? I think we did a video about him in terms of get to know or names to know in college football in 2024, and Luke Has was one of them, right? And he's a guy that um LSU fans know, right? And Arkansas fans know, but I think the rest of the SEC, Oklahoma State's going to know him early in week 2. We'll get to their schedule, but I think, but even behind Lucas, you've got Ty Washington, right, who did some nice things for you last year. I mean, it was limited sample size, yes, but I do think he gave you some nice production, right? And I think he's also taken a step as well this spring. Marquise Gums, he was a former highly sought after tight end in the transfer portal coming over from North Texas, who obviously, they use Seth Luttrell uses their tight ends pretty darn well when he was there. But Marquise Gums, I mean, you had high hopes from a year ago, didn't quite produce like you wanted him to. He was kind of deer in the headlights. It sounds like he had a really nice spring, a nice bounce back spring that you were hoping to see from him a year ago. Sounds like he can contribute in this way. And it's also like the shoulders, not everything's the pressure's not on him, right? It's Luke has everybody else get on, but Gums and Washington, in addition to a couple guys now, wide receiver room can be really nice pieces for Green. And by the way, if you're struggling with accuracy and consistency, what's a quarterback's best friend, right?
your tight end.
Big bodied tight ends with large catch radiuses over the middle, easy completions, right? You love that. You absolutely love that. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And you need a tall quarterback to do that as well. And Taylor Green fits that bill for sure. If you're going to attack the middle of the field, you need to have a large quarterback. And I think Taylor Green can do that. Let's go over to the defensive side of the ball. This is obviously highlighted by, you know, Landon Jackson. Okay. Guy who transferred previously from LSU. A very, very, very talented player. All right. He was effective in the pass rush. When he got pressure, right, he got to the quarterback. I think he had 22 pressures last year, 7 sacks. So literally almost a third of the time he got pressure on the quarterback, he brought him home, right? Which is very good. He was also really, really good in the run game. I would say that arguably he might be as good in the run game. So other than that, you lose your entire linebacking core. Your secondary was pretty not great last year. It's going to be brought together by a bunch of transfers. I don't know. How do you like this defensive line here? I mean, you're relying also
well,
on another transfer as well, to have some production.
yeah. You mentioned obviously Landon Jackson is the guy. You're bringing over a kid from Albany who had some nice pieces. They got some other defensive players going Power Five as well. But Anton June Cash, That's I believe that's the name. He's a veteran guy. He's played a lot of football, not necessarily at the SEC level, but I think he can be a nice complement to Landon Jackson, who needs other help in that room. I do not hate the interior defensive line of this team. I think you bring back
Okay.
your top 3 snap getters. Now, were they, extremely disruptive? Yeah, I don't don't know. I
Mm.
mean, I liked what Gregory did in the run defense, as well as Cam Ball a little bit. Um, but Kelby Rose is also another guy that comes back. Ian Jafrad comes back after getting his feet wet. I do think it helps to have big-bodied, experienced players in the SEC on that defensive line. I think it could be a lot worse. I think there's other spots in the defense I'm a little bit worried about, you mentioned, but regardless, I don't hate the D line. I think you feel pretty good about it, and I think they do too. I think that staff, it sounds like that they're in a spot where they can go deep and they can kind of withstand the toughness and the durability and the wear and tear that is the SEC schedule.
So that's one part of your front seven. Your linebackers, you lose Jaheim Thomas, right, who is their leading tackler. He goes over to Wisconsin. You lose Chris Paul Jr., who goes over to Ole Miss in the same conference, right? Brutal, brutal.
Listen,
And who's
real quick, but before we talk about who's actually on this team, I do have to say this. If you're Arkansas and you want to put Sam Pittman in a spot to keep his job or the next coach to keep his job, you cannot lose players in your own conference, right? Especially, it's not like it's not like it's
that's
Alabama
like
losing
Bama
Isaiah Bond to Texas, but you
or
cannot
like,
lose guys
yeah,
that at positions of need
to
and
Ole
that
Miss, right?
to Omen.
Like
Yeah, and I
Georgia's
know
one thing, Bama's another thing, LSU's another
Texas.
thing, Texas
I
is
throw
another thing.
if Oregon teaches your player whatever, they
Yeah,
can take whatever they
yeah,
want. But
exactly.
Wisconsin and I don't know if it was necessarily a coaching decision or if it was the players just trying to get out of there, but it with a staff that has been there for a while now, I to me that's disappointing. And I guess you can get into it, but
Well, it's just different if there's a coaching change, right? If there's a coaching change, obviously a kid has the right. Well, they have the right to enter the transfer portal regardless, but there's a incentive for them to go into the transfer portal and test the waters and basically see like
yeah.
where do they fit in these other teams, right? Like, am I going to fit in this new coaching system? Going to the transfer portal obviously is like really good insurance, even if you do end up coming back. Um, yeah, I think this is tough. I mean, you're bringing in three transfers to play those linebacker spots. Um, are all of them going to start? I don't know. Is Brad Spence going to play? Is he going to start? I don't know. I don't know who are going to be um those three guys in that 4-3 that are going to be playing for the most part, but I don't know. I don't know. All I know is that I don't know. I mean, Xavier Story, is he bad? I don't think he's bad.
No, he was a high recruit. I like him. And even Steven Dix is, I mean, we'll see how it translates to the SEC, but he's a former high recruit. He was at Florida State. So at least he has,
Some Power
familiarity with
Five.
a
Yeah.
Power Five experience and also the athletic build to succeed in the NFL, the SEC that you have to
Yeah.
do
I
at time
think
of season.
Larry I think Larry Worth is kind of the wild card here because he was
Yep.
very productive last year. Very, very
Yeah.
productive. 5 sacks, uh, 22 stops, 35 tackles, an interception. I mean, he was very productive last year. Is he going to start though? I don't know. I don't know what. Uh, I don't have as good of a pulse as some of these beat writers do of the Arkansas program, obviously, but feels like a guy. If I were a bet man, that guy's going to get a significant amount of snaps next year. And if he can look, I don't think Chris Paul Jr. was. I actually don't think he was the best linebacker by any stretch of the imagination. Like I know he was a highly rated recruit in the transfer portal. I don't think he was a particularly strong linebacker class in the transfer portal. I think Larry Worth could potentially, if he does maintain that kind of production, right? I think he could be pretty good, but we'll see. I still have so many questions about like what these players are going to do. I have so many questions.
Yeah, Worth is fun because he's got some positional versatility too. He can play a little bit of nickel. I mean, he's 6'4", 220. So he's got a little bit of size to play inside the box there, but he can also, step out and cover some athletes. You're bringing in Donnie Kill Slaughter as well to play that nickel linebacker spot, or I guess more so your dime or nickel safety guy from Tennessee who's got 14 career starts there. But yeah, I mean, all in all, I think you could have done worse in the portal. I do think there's a lot of question marks about, okay, is Sorey going to put it together here? Is Steven Dix, how is he going to translate? Same with Larry Worth. Is Brad Spence and Carson Dean, are they ready to play and give you quality depth? Same with Alex Sanford, even a guy like Juju Pope. I mean, we'll see. I mean, to me, it helps playing behind an experienced defensive line, obviously making your run fits better. they're going to be in the right spots. So the holes are going to be in the right spots for you to fill. You're not going to have an offense guard's helmet in your ear the whole game, but we'll see. I do think linebacker is a tough position, and it's it could be a liability. And I
It'd be
think
very
SEC
taxing
coordinators,
in the
yeah,
SEC as well.
exactly. Coordinators can really take advantage of that, especially with the RPO and everything else attacking the middle of the field.
Well, let's move over to that secondary, right? You lose production, or sorry, you gain back some production in the secondary. I say some. Hudson Clark at safety is a guy that you get a lot of production back from 44 tackles, an interception, two PBUs, and a sack. I mean, it was a pretty brutal secondary though last year. Not gonna lie. Um, actually, I mean, I guess metrically, I don't know. When I watched the games,
Yeah, I
they
like
didn't feel like that
McLovin.
good. Although people didn't throw the ball on them that much because they were just running the ball. When I'm looking at, because I'm like, oh, I didn't like their secondary last year when I watched it that much, but then I'm looking at the metrics and they didn't let up that many yards per game. But it's like, oh, well, teams only threw the ball 25 times a game against them, so that's a
Didn't
pace
have
of play
to.
thing. That's a yeah. So,
Yeah. And it's
anyways,
also being up big in games. Yeah, I mean, at least in that safety room, you've got Hudson Clark, you got Jaden Johnson, who are returners, right? They played slot, box, and free safety. They rotated all those guys. You lose Wilcott, right? Who's gone after last year, giving you almost 500 snaps. But behind them, Miguel Mitchell, Anthony Switzer. We'll see what they can do.
you lose
To,
McLovin as well.
to me, that cornerback, Lorando Johnson, McGlovern, like those are guys that you got to replace. And Jalen Braxton was not bad last
I
year.
like him. I
I
like
don't
him.
hate him at all.
I like him.
Even I kind of like Marquise Robinson from South Alabama, although and Jaheim Singletary as well. He's a talented kid from Georgia. I think he was a high
He's a
recruit.
five star. He's a five
Yeah.
star.
So again, nice having that talent in there, and at least Robinson gives you some kind of floor to have. How high is it? How good is the ceiling? Who knows? But he's played. I mean, he played JUCO year. He played 2 years at South Alabama. He's got a lot of experience seeing college quarterbacks and college offenses. That's never a bad thing. But I don't know. In an already pretty suspect room last year, you lose some of your key players. Now you have guys coming back. You got depth, getting better, 1 year older, whatever it may be. Um, to me, I do think it would help if you got a good pass rush like Landon Jackson and June
Yeah.
Cash and Nico DeVillier, right? Maybe one of your 4-star freshmen like Charlie Collins or Kavion Henderson can give you some production there. Rushing the passer would help you for sure on that back end. But um, I do think the further you get away from, the middle and then into out from the line of scrimmage, I do have some question marks.
If Jaheim Singletary is really good though, like I think the secondary has a chance to do something.
Yeah.
You know what
But
I'm
again,
saying?
if, you know,
It's a big if. Yeah. I mean, he's a talented guy. I mean, was he only a sophomore? Yeah,
I would
redshirt
think it's gonna be
sophomore.
redshirt sophomore. Yeah.
Yeah, redshirt sophomore. I don't know. It's a guy who has all the talent. Can he put it together?
I mean,
We asked we asked a question about a ton of guys. It's like, can he put it together? I don't know. I really don't
he
know. But if he
he
does,
played almost yeah. Sorry, he played almost 300 snaps last year. So at least you got his feet wet. I mean, he didn't look good in them, but not many people are as freshmen in the SEC.
yeah. And I don't know. Defense, a lot of question marks. Offense, a lot of question marks, which is probably why this win total is at 4.5, right? And then we can also talk about the schedule, right? Let's go through it. You get Arkansas Pine Bluff at home. You got to go play Oklahoma State on the road. I believe that's on the road. UAB at home. Auburn on the road, which is tough. That's a game that you would like to have at home. A&M, you get at home, or neutral site in Arlington. Tennessee, you get at home. Then a bye week. LSU at home. Mississippi State on the road. Ole Miss at home. Bye week. Texas at home. Louisiana Tech at home. And then you go to Missouri to finish the season. A team that in the past couple years that maybe you've been able to win that game, but now it's gets tougher, right? Team like Oklahoma State possibly getting better on the offensive side of the ball. Team like Auburn possibly getting better. A&M possibly getting better coaching, right? Tennessee possibly getting maybe better. Um, Ole Miss getting better. Texas is a really good team. Missouri's a really good team. I'm seeing a lot of teams that are either getting better or are very good. And the games that you would like to be at home, right? Because you'd like to win those games, Mississippi State and Auburn. You get them both on the road in the SEC. Those are your two, by far, easiest games probably in the SEC that you drew. Because by the way, you didn't draw Vanderbilt. You can't draw yourself, right? You didn't draw South
Well,
Carolina, right? So having Auburn and Mississippi State on the road, I think is pretty brutal because I think it gives you less of a chance to win those games that you would really like to win. And of course, Oklahoma State. So, I mean, when I'm looking at the out of conference, right, I'm expecting them to go 3-1 because Arkansas Pine Bluff is a win. UAB should be a win. Louisiana Tech, sorry, Sonny Cumby, your team stinks. Okay, they're gonna beat you. Okay, but then can they get 2 wins in the SEC? And last year they went 1-7.
here's what I'll say. I do like I look at that 4.5 and I'm like, that's low. And I look at their schedule in the SEC and I'm like, that's brutal. But the reality is the SEC only has 8 conference games. So there's 4 of those games are out of conference. And you mentioned those 3 wins you have to have. You have to have. If you don't beat out UAB week 3, Sam Pittman is not coming back, right? Like it won't matter. You're not gonna hit the year over, blah, blah, blah. You mentioned it, man. It's those 2 road games that all you have to do is win. Well, 3 road games. To me, it's Oklahoma State, it's Auburn, Mississippi State, all on the road. All you have to win 2 out of those 3. That's a tough ask. That's a tough ask. Listen, I
Yeah,
I don't know,
if I
man.
was a betting man, right, and if you were to tell me, oh yeah, Sam Pittman gets fired mid-season, what week does he get fired? My guess would be after that November 2nd game against Ole Miss, where they're probably over in the SEC. Well, maybe if they lose to
You got
Mississippi
one
State
win.
and then lose to Ole Miss, and they're winless in the SEC up until that point, I think that they go use that bye week to kind of get that coaching staff figured out without Sam
Yeah.
Pittman, basically. So I,
It's tough, by the way. And not that this is a college basketball show, but you've got a pretty significant head coaching job and buzz around that basketball program now, right? You come, late October into November, it's going to shift into a basketball school, right? And especially if you're not winning football games, I don't know. To me, I'm taking the under here because the wheels could fall off. And as much as I love Sam Pittman, as much as I kind of do like what they did changing from last year this year. I just think the schedule stuff, dynamics are hard. Too much uncertainty in positions that are pretty important, right? Quarterback, O line, secondary. To me, give me the under. I feel like it's the more safe bet. Although I wouldn't really bet this, I don't think in real life, but
no,
if I had to pick one, I'm taking the under.
yeah, I'm not betting that. And it's only, I mean, it is minus 105. That's could be pretty decent value, but yeah, I'm with you. I'm taking the under for sure. Yeah, I just think the wheels could definitely fall off. Like if this offensive line does not improve, like because we thought this, like, and I've used this example 100 times. Like Auburn, we thought that they might have a decent offensive line because they brought in uh Gunnar Britton and several other guys that you thought, oh, these high level G5 transfers might they might be able to do something, right? And not that these guys were G5, all of them were, but I'm just saying bringing in a bunch of transfers on the offensive line to fix it, right? Maybe plug a hole, right? But to fix the entire offensive line is a recipe for disaster. Okay. Um, yeah, I got to go with the under 4.5 here. If Taylor Green makes it to a bowl game, I'll be severely impressed. And I would imagine that he would be receiving all SEC honorable mention nods for sure.